The history of Scotland. The proud nation of Scotland, home to the Highlands, Lowlands, Islands, and Lochs, has long stood apart as one of the most culturally distinct lands in Europe. Today it forms part of the United Kingdom, the second largest in land and population after England. Yet until the early 18th century, Scotland was a fully independent kingdom, forged through centuries of warfare, alliances, betrayals, and above all, the enduring spirit of a people determined to shape their own destiny. Early inhabitants. Humans have lived in Scotland for over 10,000 years. These earliest communities, first nomadic hunters and gatherers, later became farmers, raising monuments such as the great standing stone circles at Stenness in Orkney and Callanish on the Isle of Lewis. These megaliths, built thousands of years ago, were centers of ritual and belief. The first written record of Scotland came not from its people, but from Pytheas of Massalia, a Greek explorer who, around 325 BC, circumnavigated Britain. He called the island Albion, but its northern reaches he named Orcus, a term that survives today in the Orkney Islands. The Roman challenge. When the Romans invaded Britain in 43 AD, they gradually pushed north into Scotland. By 71 AD, their legions had entered the southern uplands, and in 84 AD, under Governor Agricola, they defeated the Caledonians at the Battle of Mons Graupius. Despite this victory, the Romans never fully subdued the region. Harsh terrain, constant resistance, and the expense of occupation forced them to retreat south. By the early 2nd century, their frontier was marked by Hadrian's Wall, and though they later built the Antonine Wall farther north, Scotland remained beyond their lasting control. The Picts, Scots, and New Kingdoms. The withdrawal of Rome left the north to its native peoples. The Picts, descendants of the Caledonians, dominated much of the land. To the west, settlers from Ireland. The Scoti established the Kingdom of Dalriada. In the southwest, the Brittonic-speaking Kingdom of Strathclyde emerged, while the Anglo-Saxons settled in the southeast, forming Bernicia, later part of Northumbria. The Viking Age. This fragile balance was shattered in 793 AD, when Norse raiders struck the monasteries of Iona and Lindisfarne. Viking attacks soon gave way to permanent settlements in Orkney, Shetland, and the Hebrides, forming the mixed Norse-Gaelic Kingdom of the Isles. In response, the Gaelic Kingdom of Dalriada united with the Pictish Kingdom of Fortriu under Kenneth MacAlpin in the mid-9th century. From this union arose the Kingdom of Alba, the foundation of medieval Scotland. The making of a kingdom. By the 11th century, Alba had expanded to absorb Strathclyde and parts of Northumbria, forming a frontier with the rising Kingdom of England. The Dunkeld dynasty consolidated royal power, but foreign influence grew. After 1066, William the Conqueror pressed north, forcing King Malcolm III to recognize his authority. Norman knights brought feudal practices that reshaped Scotland's governance and tied its politics to those of England. Crisis and conflict. The death of King Alexander III in 1286 left Scotland in turmoil. With no direct heir, 14 claimants vied for the throne. The nobles turned to England's King Edward I to arbitrate, but he used the chance to declare Scotland a feudal dependency of England. John Balliol was chosen as king in 1292, but Edward undermined his rule, sparking outrage. In 1295, Scotland forged the Auld Alliance with France for protection. Yet the following year, Edward invaded, beginning a new era of war and resistance that would shape Scotland's identity for centuries to come. The conquest of Scotland reached a symbolic moment when King Edward I of England seized the Stone of Scone, the sacred coronation stone of Scottish monarchs, and carried it to Westminster Abbey in London. There, he had it built into his coronation chair, a bold declaration of his supremacy as Lord Paramount of Scotland. For centuries afterward, the stone was used in the coronations of English and later British monarchs. In response to English occupation, a group of Scottish nobles, led by William Wallace, raised an army and began the conflicts remembered as the Wars of Scottish Independence. Wallace achieved a stunning victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297, though the following year he was defeated by Edward at the Battle of Falkirk. Forced into hiding, Wallace was eventually captured in 1305, taken to London, and brutally executed as a traitor, despite never swearing loyalty to the English crown. Following his death, Robert the Bruce was crowned King of Scotland in 1306 and continued the struggle. His decisive victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 secured Scotland's independence and ended the first phase of the conflict. By 1328, the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton formally recognized Scottish sovereignty. Scotland in the late Middle Ages. By the 15th century, Scotland's borders resembled those of today. Although it lost the Isle of Man in the early 1400s, King James III gained the Orkney and Shetland Islands in 1468 as part of his marriage to Margaret of Denmark. In 1437, Edinburgh became Scotland's permanent capital, replacing Scone as the traditional site of coronations. This period also saw the founding of Scotland's great universities: St. Andrews 1413, Glasgow 1451, and Aberdeen 1495, laying the foundation for a long tradition of scholarship. Clash with England. In the 16th century, Scotland's independence was tested again. In 1513, King James IV invaded England but suffered a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Flodden Field, where he was killed, the last British monarch to die in battle. His son, James V, fared little better, dying shortly after his defeat at Solway Moss in 1542. Meanwhile, Europe was in religious upheaval. England's Henry VIII broke from Rome in 1534, launching the Protestant Reformation. Determined to weaken the traditional Catholic alliance between Scotland and France, Henry began the Rough Wooing, a brutal campaign to force a marriage between his son, Prince Edward, and the young Scottish Queen, Mary, Queen of Scots. Union of the Crowns. Despite Mary's tragic fate, her son James VI of Scotland inherited the English crown in 1603, becoming James I of England. This was the Union of the Crowns, uniting both realms under one monarch, though Scotland and England remained separate kingdoms with their own governments and laws. James moved his royal court to London, distancing the monarchy from Scotland. Tensions deepened under his son Charles I, whose attempt to impose an English-style prayer book in 1637 provoked fierce resistance from Scottish Presbyterians. This unrest helped ignite the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, a series of brutal conflict across Scotland, England, and Ireland. Scotland initially allied with English Parliament against Charles, but divisions remained. Many Highland clans supported the king. After Charles's execution in 1649, Scotland proclaimed his son Charles II as king, but English forces under Oliver Cromwell invaded, defeating the Scots at the Battle of Dunbar, 1650. Jacobites and the road to union. The late 17th century brought religious turmoil once again. King James VII of Scotland, James II of England, a Catholic, alarmed his Protestant subjects. In 1688, his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange were invited to take the throne in what became known as the Glorious Revolution. Yet many Scots, particularly in the Highlands, remained loyal to James, sparking the Jacobite risings. The first uprising in 1689 was crushed, followed by the infamous massacre of Glencoe, 1692. Scotland then faced economic ruin after the catastrophic failure of the Darien Scheme, an attempt to establish a colony in Panama. Nearly a fifth of Scotland's wealth was lost, fueling calls for closer ties with England. In 1707, the Act of Union merged the Scottish and English parliaments, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain under Queen Anne. Though it promised economic stability, many Scots saw it as a betrayal of their hard-won independence, intensifying Jacobite support. The Enlightenment and industrial Scotland. Despite political upheaval, the 18th century witnessed the Scottish Enlightenment, producing thinkers like Adam Smith, whose Wealth of Nations founded modern economics, and poets like Robert Burns. Scotland entered the industrial age with rapid urbanization, shipbuilding on the River Clyde, and advances in engineering, steel, and coal. The population soared from 1.6 million in 1801 to 4.4 million by 1900. But industrialization also brought poverty, overcrowding, and disease, prompting millions of Scots to emigrate to North America and Australia. Modern Scotland. By the 20th century, Scotland was one of the most industrialized parts of the British Empire. Yet the decline of heavy industry after World War I and II led to economic hardship and social unrest. By the late 20th century, demands for autonomy grew louder. In 1999, after nearly 300 years, the Scottish Parliament was reconvened, gaining control over key domestic affairs. Today, the debate over Scotland's independence continues, a reflection of its long and proud history of resisting external control while shaping its own destiny.